So in the last video on my 135i, I promised that I was going to be using OEM parts as and where I should. And that's why when I replaced the rocker cover gasket on this car, I went straight to BMW for those parts. But there's some scenarios where this isn't necessarily the best idea because some of the BMW parts on the N54 engine are inherently flawed. So all of the parts that I've got to go on my car today are actually not from BMW, they are aftermarket parts. And as I mentioned in the first video, one of the main problems with this car is an excessive water leak. So that's the first thing to sort. Fingers crossed we've got all the parts that we need to fix it, so let's get on with it. So more repairs needed on the 135i, and the first thing is fixing this water leak, which as we diagnosed up at Bertie's, our favourite northern mechanics, it was the water pump. So to be able to gain access to this, we've got to remove all of the 8mm from the under tray, and then we can see exactly what we're going to be working with. Okay, so now we have the under tray all removed, we can see what's going on and we can see the water pump in question just up here, but you can see it's not the most accessible, so there's a few things that we need to remove to be able to gain access to that. One of those being the anti-roll bar and the other one being the power steering line. And in preparation, I spent all of last night watching YouTube videos, so basically I'm a professional now. So the first thing to remove underneath is the anti-roll bar. Well, we haven't got to remove it, all we've got to do is drop it down. So in order to do that, there's 4 E-Torques, which then gives us enough room to be able to pull it down and then access the water pump. And then just quickly removing the brackets which hold on the power steering lines. Okay, so now we've got those out of the way, we can see where we need to get to. This is the water pump that I believe is leaking, and there's a plug on it, 2 pipes, and I believe 4 bolts. So let's see how I'll be able to get off. You'll have to excuse the filming in here a little bit. It wasn't the easiest thing to do given how tight a space it was, but with the Jubilee clips removed, I could professionally drain the system. Ah! Be careful! Oh my god! Also, it'd be great to interact with you guys a little bit more, so go and hit me up on Instagram. It's @chris.slix. So after that was drained, I could remove the Jubilee clip for the other pipe, and then we could pull that off when removing it. Next up, there was the 4 bolts to deal with down the bottom, and there was actually one on the top, but I'll come back to that shortly. So the 2 bolts on the right hand side, which I'm undoing now, actually mount the water pump to the engine. Then there's also the 2 bolts on the other side, which mount the thermostat housing to the water pump. With everything out of the way, these were actually quite nice to get to. Okay, so newsflash, it turns out that someone's changed it before and not bothered putting in this bolt here.
I know who did it.
Was it you?
No, it was Arthur.
Half a job.
Hey!
Banter! Top banter! So with 4 bolts removed and 1 never fitted, the water pump was now loose and ready to be removed from the car. So with a bit of a wiggle, we were able to get that out. And I think we can all tell from the smug little look on my face, I was pretty chuffed for myself being able to do this. Next up, for peace of mind, I also wanted to change the thermostat housing. This was a proper fiddly job, so there's 4 pipes which lead to it, and also an electrical connector. But after we wiggle those off, we were able to drain even more coolant out of the system and remove it from the car.
Oh my, there's more water.
Oh yes, I'm a mechanical genius! Right, so we've now got the thermostat and the water pump out, and the water pump was actually surprisingly easy, but the thermostat was a bit more of a wrestle. So these 2 pipes here were held on with Jubilee clips. They were quite easy to get off, but these 2 were held on with metal pins, which were much more tricky to get off. Even though the pins came off pretty easy, the pipes wouldn't, so I had to wrestle with those for quite a while to jiggle them off. So anyway, it's out. So here is the new thermostat, and that looks pretty much exactly the same, and also the new water pump. Now I know you can get these where this plastic end case is actually metal, which is much better than this option, but this is all I could get in a short space of time, so it's going to definitely be better than the old one anyway, and hopefully it holds up. So it is a little bit of a shame that I wasn't able to get an uprated water pump, but you know me, I do everything last minute, so it is what it is. So we put the thermostat back in first and then reinstalled the water pump. With a bit of a jiggle, we were able to get the pipes back on without too much faff. I then made sure that all of the Jubilee clips were nice and tight and all the electrical connectors were on properly, and then tightened everything into place. This job was definitely made a bit easier by having a ramp, but it's definitely also a job that a rookie can do, because if I can do it, anyone can. So now putting in the final few bolts to mount the thermostat housing to the water pump, and then we could check if it was working. Now that was a ball ache of a job. So everything under here now is properly fastened up, and we've got that extra bolt in the top of the water pump where it should be. And before I put the anti-roll bar and the power steering lines back where they are, let's put some coolant in it and make sure that my work's okay, fingers crossed. Okay, so we've now got the coolant topped up to where it says on the tank, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be no airlocks in the system. So I think these BMWs have got a self-bleed feature in them, so let's try it. So I think what you've got to do is hold your foot on the accelerator for 10 seconds after turning the ignition on but not starting the car. So I was close but not quite right, so you've got to turn the ignition on with your heaters on full heat but fan position 1, and then hold your foot on the throttle for about 10 to 12 seconds without turning the engine on, and then the car will self-bleed its coolant system. Which, to be fair, is a proper handy feature, so after I checked it all over for leaks and then topped it up again, we were good to go. And finally, back on with the anti-roll bar and the power steering lines, and that was everything fastened up. So she's all back in one piece, and fingers crossed is going to hold coolant in this time. Matthew, cheers for letting us use your ramp, mate, and now we can go and give it a test drive.
You have to subscribe to my channel.
No, no one wants to.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so not the most exciting test drive in the world, but everything is now up to temperature, and we've had no hoses pop off, no coolant lights come on the dash, so I think we are well in. Only time will tell whether that was actually the fix, because it was quite a slow leak, but I'm feeling pretty hopeful. So I'm going to call that a success. Even if it's not fixed the problem, I'm still pretty happy that I've managed to do that without cocking it up, basically. But we can't stop yet. We've still got more parts to fit on the car, so we've got to get straight back inside and carry on with the work. So on the N55 and N54 engines, like what's in my 135i, it's super common to have issues with the charge pipe, and that's why I've got this. So this is an aftermarket uprated charge pipe which is made out of aluminium rather than plastic, so it's not going to be prone to the same problems that the OEM one is. So this was supplied to us by Alex at WHP Performance, and they are specialists in BMW N54, N55 and S55 engines. So if you've got any 135i, 140, 240, M3, M4, make sure you go and hit them up for your performance parts. Alex is also very kindly offering you guys 10% off all of the products he sells, so if you need a charge pipe or anything else for your BMW, make sure you go and hit him up on Instagram and quote code ChrisSlix to save yourself 10%. So this one is more of a preventative fix because these are super common. I actually had this go on my old M135i and it was not fun. So luckily on this engine it's actually a little bit easier, but we've got to remove all of the scuttle panel and air filter and everything like that to be able to gain access to it. So once we removed all that, there was 5 things we needed to remove to be able to remove the charge pipe from the car. The first one was the metal clip which holds it to the throttle body. Then there was the 2 recirc valves which are on twist fittings. There's a Jubilee clip down the bottom holding it to the intercooler pipe, and finally an electrical connector. The next job was then to swap that sensor over from the original one to the new alloy charge pipe, and then we could fit on these silicon joiners which enable us to use the factory recirc valves on this aftermarket pipe. And then with a little bit of negotiation we managed to get this squeezed into the engine bay and refit it back to the car. So the only difference is when you're refitting this to the car is really the recirc valve. Instead of it being a twist fitting, it's now held on with Jubilee clips, which is just as easy as before. To be honest with you, fitting an uprated charge pipe to one of these is actually a nice easy little mod. The only thing I would say is just make sure all of your fittings are pushed in properly, make sure your Jubilee clips are in the right position and tight, and you're good to go. And there we have it, one freshly installed alloy charge pipe, and it definitely looks better as well as having better function, so hopefully we're going to have no issues with that in the future. Also, I've got my third brake light working now. That company sent me out another one, and this one now works, so that's sorted. And I thought I'd share this one with you guys because it's pretty funny, and I'm sure someone out there has had the same thing. I thought I was having an issue with my clutch pedal. It kind of felt sticky at the top, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me what it was because the clutch was still working fine. And I think it turns out that my floor mat was actually getting caught on the clutch pedal, causing it to feel iffy. So if anyone's got a weird feeling clutch pedal, check your floor mats. I feel like I'm starting to make some progress on this engine now. It's getting better and better the more we work on it, which is probably a good sign, but that's definitely not the end of the engine works on this, unfortunately. It looks like the sump gasket is still leaking, along with a few other things, so there's plenty more work to do here before we can properly start modifying. But that is going to have to wait for another video. For now, go and follow me on Instagram at coontactchrisslix. Don't forget to subscribe, press the like button, and I'll see you next time.